What is one question that we now have after the Eagles win on Friday over the Green Bay Packers, and what's something we got answered? We'll get into that and more on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to this Tuesday edition of the show. I'm Louis DiBiase, joined as always by Gino Camilleri. Coming up on today's edition of the podcast, it's Q&A Tuesday. What's something that we had answered for us in Friday's win against Green Bay, but Gino, also some questions that we now have heading into the second matchup with the Atlanta Falcons. We'll hear from our listeners as well. Take a look forward to this Falcons matchup. And Gino, I would say again, we said this yesterday, I thought more positives came from that win than negatives. And maybe the question is something positive to you, but what is something you came away from that game saying, okay, I need to have that answered by next week against Atlanta, or something you didn't think you had a question about that now you kind of are keeping a closer eye on heading into the next matchups?
I think the easy one is to talk about Jalen Hurts, but I think I'm going to avoid that. Like the turnover question, I think everybody has that same question. Is this something that's going to continue on week after week after week? One question that I still have about this team is Nick Sirianni. What exactly is he doing in this whole grand scheme of things? Because there were still some moments in that game, Lou, where they were a little bit undisciplined. They lacked a little bit of preparation at times. And there were still those mistakes where you're saying, if Nick Sirianni isn't calling plays and he's not the defensive guy either, they have to fine tune some of those areas. I'm still waiting to see where Nick kind of puts his footprint on this football team moving forward.
That's a really good point, and I actually thought the same thing early in that game. He was the one I was more frustrated with than even Jalen Hurts when I saw the first pick, when I saw the fumble between Cam Jurgens and Jalen Hurts, the botched snap. And yeah, of course, like Jalen Hurts, the turnovers are getting concerning from last year to this year, but that's the exact reason I was frustrated at Sirianni, Gino, is what you just said. His role is so much different now. He is not running this offense. He has never run the defense. He's pretty much had a head coach running it on the other side, and that's kind of what happens when you have a head coach that runs the offense, and especially if they're calling plays. Doug Peterson had a very similar setup with Jim Schwartz. You can even go back to Andy Reid's days with Jim Johnson, right? Like they ran the defense. But now that Sirianni's not running either side, it's okay. He's about culture. He's about the small details. He's about making sure this team is prepared week in and week out. Like he's the day-to-day like CEO almost now. So if they're coming out of the gate looking sloppy in that way, then what is Sirianni doing that we can give him credit for?
That was exactly it. My first two takeaways after those first two drives were, what were you preparing?
I was frustrated with the head coach more than anyone. I agree. I'm like, they don't look prepared, and that's on Nick, because if not, then what is he responsible for?
Yeah, we're talking about the center quarterback miscommunication. Like, how is that not one of the things that, if you're the head coach and you want the finest details boiled down, even Nick said it the other day in his press conference, Jalen Hurts touches the ball every single game. So is the center quarterback relationship and the timing of the snap not one thing that the CEO head coach should have the most dialed in going into an unknown environment on the road in week one? That's one of those things where I'm saying, Nick, you still have some things to clean up. But along that game, I think they started to dial it in, Lou. They started to take less dumb penalties. Jalen Carter obviously had some dumb moments of his own. And I think the offense, all in all, they had some moments where you're shaking your head. But Nick Sirianni, he still has a lot of answering of questions to do, because I think the biggest answer that I got answered was, do the other two guys that he hired, did they get the job done? And in my opinion, 100% yes.
Yeah, I completely agree. I will give Sirianni credit for one thing, Gino. I thought last year he was a little more conservative than he was in 2022. And I did think that Friday, it felt like they were more aggressive. He was more trusting of his team, because I thought closer to the end of last year, the decision-making in that way was frustrating and suspect. And I thought there were times that he kind of took the coward way out, and that's not what the Eagles want in their head coach, and that really wasn't his bread and butter the first 2 years of being the coach of this team, and that wasn't Doug Peterson's MO either. Like, that's kind of the DNA of an Eagles head coach lately, has been that they're aggressive and they go for it in spots that it makes sense. And so I will say that's one positive is I thought Sirianni's decision-making in that realm, I was happy with that on Friday at least.
And one of those things that I think you could kind of boil down to culture as well is that long drive at the end of the football game, right? Where they're like, hey, remember that good winning football we played 2 years ago when we were able to just grind games out and did not give the team an opportunity to come back and win those games, which in 2023, you couldn't seal out a lot of those games towards the end of the season. So that is one area where you want to see your head coach dial that team in, get them in the zone for a big 4-minute drive. And you heard the excitement in his voice. If you listen to his press conference, the reporter asked the question. He's like, well, you had a 4-minute drill for around 7.5 minutes. He's like, just say that out loud again.
Yeah, he was fired up.
How awesome is that? And yeah, that's one of those things that your head coach has to be dialed in on and let the coordinators call the plays. You as the head coach, you have to hold everybody accountable to the highest standard. And going into next week, I think you'll see how the accountability transfers to your quarterback. If Jalen Hurts,
great point,
in those plays when he's outside of the pocket and he's looking downfield, he throws the ball out of bounds instead of throwing it into double coverage. Those are the meetings that we want to see Nick Sirianni have, because he's not responsible to go through each play and the reporters can call him out on that. No, the little things are what Nick has to dial in. But there were ups and downs to the game for everybody, but I still have that question about Nick moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you were going to give him blame for the Eagles coming out of the gate sloppy and still having the same mistakes as last year with those turnovers, you do have to give him credit too for his team not snowballing, right, and overcoming that.
4-0 in week 1, Lou.
Yeah.
Like that's a good record to have, man.
But at the same time, like, he needs to make sure that's nipped in the butt early, because when a team, like, they overcame that a lot in the first half of last year, but Gino, when you have to overcome that week after week after week, it weighs on you, the pressure, I mean, the stress of it. I mean, there was that source that said the Eagles were the most miserable 10-1 team that they'd ever seen, and I think it's because there was just so many obstacles to overcome it. They worked so hard to get to that record. So yes, you got to give Sirianni credit for having his team ready to overcome that. Unlike last year, they're clearly showing they still will fight for this guy, but you have to nip that in the butt, because that will come back to bite you in the end.
Without a doubt, man. And I think you put it perfectly. Like, right now is the perfect time
to
get the penalties, to get the center quarterback relationship, to get those breakdowns and coverages. Week 1 might have been the biggest blessing in disguise for you to come out of that game the way that you did, because you did hit adversity. There were things that you can learn from, but at the same time, preaching the message of, hey, if we do play as good as we know we can get to wherever we want to go. And that's what the head coach has to instill as well. So he's always been a positive guy, man. Even in the worst of times last year, he's not somebody that buys into like the rat poison, like Nick Saban said. He dials things in his locker room, and who knows what goes on behind closed doors, but it was refreshing to see this team turn it around in the second half when things were going awry.
I do have a question about Jalen Hurts, but it doesn't really have to do with what we were discussing yesterday. For me is, does Jalen Hurts still have the explosiveness that we're used to that makes him elite? Because yes, Jalen Hurts has come a long way as a pocket passer over the last 2 years. And I thought he was great inside the pocket this past week, outside of a couple of those, turnover worthy throws, those interceptions. Like, I thought his ball placement was great. He was 6 of 7 against the blitz. But no matter, and like, that's Kellen Moore's offense, right? Jalen showed like he can thrive in a offense where he's going through progressions more, using pre-snap motion. When a defense says we're not going to let you run, he can still beat you with his arm. But to get the most out of Jalen Hurts, for him to be worth the contract, he needs to be able to run, Gino. And I think it had to do with the field. Like, it felt like Jalen didn't trust the grass. It felt like he was tiptoeing a lot, throwing the football away when he could have extended some plays. But I do want to see that explosiveness come back. Like, last year, he was injured, and that really held the offense back when he wasn't able to make plays outside of structure. We want to see that return, like next week against Atlanta. Can he get on the move? When he bails outside the pocket, like, can he be more efficient as a passer on the run? Like, sure, he doesn't have the flexibility, throwing motion and body-wise as like a Patrick Mahomes or even a Caleb Williams, but this is why you want a mobile quarterback, though, is so they can make those extra plays. So that's not something that I'm doubting right now, but it's something that they need to see come back.
I think this question is the old adage of being at that fork in the road, right? Like, you've seen the success of Jalen Hurts inside of the pocket, and we've always used the analogy of you can't take away an RG3's legs and try to make them a pocket passer. But an RG3 and Michael Vick, they were never as good as Jalen Hurts is in the pocket. Like, a drop back quarterback as good as Jalen Hurts, that's a top 5 guy looking at any numbers from week 1. Outside of those interceptions, he's somebody who does better inside of the pocket. So the fork in the road is, do we completely eliminate that element and go full force into him being a pocket quarterback? Not at all. You still have to prioritize that 12-on-10 ability when you're on offense to use his arms and his legs as a weapon. But the thing is, are you going to have to maybe boil down that playbook a little bit? It might not be as expansive as you first thought coming into this season. But like you said, take everything when it comes to footing, speed, with a grain of salt. Even though A.J. Brown hit like world-beating numbers when it came to miles per hour.
Especially in the scramble drill, though, when you have to make like rapid, short, quick changes of direction, it was probably really tough on that field.
In the read game, man, that's foot in the ground, go. Like that split decision, like quick twitch type of stuff. And there were times when you saw it, like he might not have got his footing and he goes down instantly on that read when he might have made the wrong decision instead of trying to make a guy miss. But I think the bigger question is, where does Kellen Moore lean into Jalen Hurts? Does he continue to take that away, or does he say, we have a guy who can deliver some outstanding footballs from the pocket, and that might keep him from being the self-destructive Jalen Hurts that you see at times when he does go outside of the pocket and want to be that wild card. But we've seen so much good from that.
I was going to say, you need that part of it, and he just needs to be better. Like, especially... Jalen's always been great as a runner, especially in the scramble drill too, not just design runs, but he needs to be better as a passer on the run. Like, that's a part of the game, or else the defense is never going to respect you and they're going to go right in on you. And then it kind of hurts your ability to run the football as a scrambler when you can't pass it as efficiently. So I think that's a question. And again, kind of like the edge rushers, I'm taking it with a grain of salt because of the conditions. We'll see what happens Monday night against the Atlanta Falcons. What did we have answered in that game against the Green Bay Packers? Gino and I, we will get into it coming up next on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Eagles is brought to you by Hims. No man wants to lose his hair, but for men, it's actually very common. And now with Hims, the solution is simple. Try Hims Hair Loss Solutions, and you'll be joining hundreds of thousands of subscribers who got their flow back. Hims provides access to a range of hair loss treatments that work, all from the comfort of your couch. Hims makes treating hair loss simple with doctor-trusted treatment options and clinically proven ingredients like finasteride and minoxidil. They can regrow hair in as little as 3 to 6 months. They offer personalized chewable, oral, spray, and serum treatment options so you can find what works best for you. The process is simple and 100% online. Just answer a few questions and a medical provider will determine if treatment is right for you. If prescribed, your treatment is sent directly to your door. So start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedonnfl. That's HIMS.com, hims.com/lockedonnfl for your personalized hair loss treatment option. hims.com/lockedonnfl. Disclaimer, results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil. Prescriptions products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See the website for full details and important safety information. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. But guys, make sure your second listen is the new Locked On NFL podcast, which is now 2 shows every single day. First, of course, you got the madman Tyler Rowland kicking things off in the morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. Then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in just 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Make the madman Tyler Rowland and the barber Tony Wiggins your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. So, Gino, we were talking a lot about some questions we have after that game in Green Bay. Mostly have to do with the head coach and the quarterback, Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts. But I think we did get a lot of answers early on, too. Like, for me, Saquon Barkley was absolutely worth that contract. And I'm not somebody, this isn't 2019, Lou, that's pounding the table for Josh Jacobs to be the first round pick. And I wouldn't stop talking about it every single day for like 2.5 months. I don't think this is a position that you should invest a lot of money in. Draft capital. I mean, look at the 49ers. They just had an undrafted rookie come in, or what, second, third year player, but an undrafted player come in for Christian McCaffrey and completely ball out on Monday Night Football against a great Jets defense. Like, that is the right strategy most of the time. But Saquon showed us on Friday that he's a rarity. Like, he is worth the $12 million a year that he's getting because he's such a weapon. It's not just that receiving touchdown that looked like a receiver was making the play, but even that 20-yard run that he ripped off in the second half. There was, like, the original play design, I think he was supposed to go through the right side. There was nothing there. He saw that, stayed patient, made 2 quick cuts, got through the A gap on the left side, and boom, broke out a huge run. Like that, there's only a few running backs in this league right now that can make that play. So I think while normally this should not be the strategy moving forward for Howie Roseman at this position, but I think Friday showed you he can be a game changer and a reason you're winning because of that position with Saquon Barkley.
I think you could boil it down to as simple as a statement as this. Pay good football players, and especially the ones that are rarities. Saquon Barkley is a rarity at this position. You pay this guy. You pay him 12 point whatever million dollars. If that number doesn't go into the twos for a player like that, and it does not exceed Christian McCaffrey money, which it's not even close to Christian McCaffrey money, and he can do exactly what he did for you in week 1, he is a game changer.
Darnell Mooney had 1 catch for 15 yards, by the way, on Sunday, and that's the guy we always compare him to because that's the contract he got instead of Mooney for the Eagles.
You're not paying this guy Darnell Mooney or Matthew Dellavedova money. You're just paying him baseline type of cash for a guy who should be getting A.J. Brown money, for a guy who should be getting Devontae Smith money, for somebody that deserves to be paid that much money.
Especially for this team. It makes sense for this. The 2021 Eagles should not pay Saquon Barkley. This version of the Eagles, it was absolutely worth the investment. This was that final piece, at least on offense, you needed.
And yeah, thankfully the Giants didn't because they weren't in a situation to even keep him on the team. They're not in compete mode, and the Eagles
they
knew
shouldn't
that.
Paid him.
The Eagles know that right now is the window. And when you're looking at all of these metrics and you just see this bubble that's an outlier, and you're like, we can get him for the same amount of money as Darnell Mooney, but he's a way better player.
Which was always our logic is, yes, you normally don't pay a running back that much money, but for this instance, and when you look at comparatively speaking what that talent you're paying, what you're getting for that money for this compared to what you would have spent it on at another more important position, absolutely worth it.
You know what it felt like? Well, not that I know what this feeling felt like, but it felt like those people who got Apple stock way back when, and then we were able to jump into a time machine to today, and those people saw what their Apple stock was worth. It was like, oh, we knew that this was going to be something, but we didn't know it was going to be this. And that's kind of what Saquon, but 3 touchdowns.
That's a great point. I didn't think he was going to. Yeah, Gino, like I was excited about him. There is no chance I was expecting that on Friday. That was incredible.
Especially after the first snap where he loses his footing. You're like, oh, this is probably going to be a precarious position for somebody like Saquon Barkley, who's a bigger runner, likes to play low to the ground. It might be more difficult. No, once he figured it out, Lou, now you can see what is he going to do under the lights with all those Eagles fans come Monday night on Nick Foles' retirement night. Feed the beast, Lou. Like that's your trendsetter. One thing I learned, the Eagles have to be able to run the ball to be a successful football team in the National Football League, Lou.
No, they're just different. They are a different team when they can run the football. I
think you made a great point bringing up San Francisco because they're the same type of way. You invest this money in Ayuk and you invest this money in Debo, but bread and butter is running the ball and establishing things at the line of scrimmage, and that's ultimately why the Philadelphia Eagles won the other night. Because when Mekhi Becton, your 5th guy on the line, is able to create as much push and dent the defensive line as much as he did and keep your quarterback clean for the most part, Lou. I mean, Jalen Hurts was under pressure a little bit, but they graded out as, I believe, the second highest pass rate team in the league.
Yep.
So if they can run the football, get into this Kellen Moore play action world, which go into that Jalen Hurts running the football type of thing. Maybe we adjust. Maybe we're not so much of a read team, but we're moving the pocket. We're getting him and booting him out so that, hey, if it is man, just go pick up those yardages. Just go pick up that first down. But at the same time, we established the game through the line of scrimmage and Saquon Barkley. I think it goes hand in hand. We signed this guy who's an offensive weapon, who now running between the tackles, Lou, is more effective than anybody that you have had over the last couple of years. No disrespect to DeAndre Swift, no disrespect to Miles Sanders and Kenny Gainwell. It's all respect to that offensive line. This is LaShawn McCoy level
Barkley. Stuff. Yeah, this
100%, man.
This is shady level stuff, and I think that was totally answered on Friday. What's something for you that you had answered?
They made the right hires at the coordinator position.
Yeah.
We weren't waiting until week 12 to say, like, what is this defense going to do? And how is this offensive identity going to look? I think you have a clear identity on both sides of the ball. And I think it's motion-based on both sides. It's having good to great athletes allow you to do what you want to do in terms of that chessboard matchup. But those coordinators, Vic Fangio, Kellen Moore, A+. All the way around. It's one game. But those areas that you needed to see improvement. Did the Eagles look great against the run in that second half? Not as good as they did in the first half. But in the first half, they came out there and they really set their way at the line of scrimmage. Jordan Davis was a beast in there. Fangio knew that him and Jalen Carter, those were going to be the guys that they run through. And he did a great job doing that. Getting Zach Bond, somebody who we thought doesn't even fit into this linebacking rotation, and able to get the play out of a player like that. Vic Fangio, hats off to him. Setting up Reed Blankenship in those situations. Knowing Quinyon Mitchell was the guy over the rest of the guys in the room. Knowing that Kellen Moore can move these guys around and don't just have to put them on islands. And our good friend Liam Jenkins over at Philly Sports Network did a little video where he put the overlays of the route tree from week 1 versus last year's week 1, Lou. A.J. Brown, last year, it looked like a little kid in high school. Like, ran 3 routes, one side of the ball. Last Friday, this thing looked like a spider web. It was beautiful. Like, crisscrossing patterns all over the field, running slants, running deep, running comebacks. Kellen Moore, chef's kiss. It's a beautiful recipe. I can't wait to see, rather, how they continue to build things off of those base packages that they have already implemented, Lou. Like, if you watch the Saquon Barkley touchdown play on that wheel, Dallas Goedert is coming open on an underneath with nobody on him. When they go back and look at the tape, they could say, oh, we have another option here. Like, we're going to work different things out of these similar
I think Devontae Smith was open over the middle, too, for a touchdown on that play. They had 3 guys open.
They're going to be able to scheme more off of that. And the plays that didn't, I think Kellen Moore is the right guy to kind of dial it in.
I totally agree. I think they nailed those hires, and the first game was a pretty good sign that that'll continue to be the trend in 2024. We'll finish up Q&A Tuesday. Coming up next, we'll hear from some of our listeners. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
As always, this episode of LOE is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And listen, you've heard us talk about FanDuel. Well, we're going to tell you something a little different today. Now, through September 22nd, so you still have 12 days, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Somebody like me who's never lived in Philadelphia, that never could just pop on the TV and click on a local channel to see the Birds play. I've always had to rely on Sunday Ticket. I also have YouTube TV for all the college sports as well. So this is perfect. And if you want to get this package as well, all you have to do is get a YouTube TV base plan. You'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. Watch Red Zone. It is the best. All you need is Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel at any time. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com to look at all the odds for next week's games against the Philadelphia Eagles, Atlanta Falcons, and whatever respective sport you like betting over at FanDuel.
All right, we're wrapping up this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. We're going to get to some of our questions on our YouTube community page from our viewers. Make sure you guys check us out. If you're not subscribing to our YouTube channel, do that. We have a community page now. We're posting content, polls, questions, social media graphics. We're throwing it all up there. Love interacting with you guys. So we'll finish up our Q&A style of episode with some questions from our viewers. And let's go to one from Patrick Reagan at Patrick Reagan /CZ1P on YouTube. Guys, does this team need a speed receiver / deep threat to really reach its full potential? Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, 2 of the top 10 highest graded receivers according to PFF this week. Dallas Goedert, I thought, had a solid game. We know what Saquon Barkley did. Gino, I don't know. I think this offense showed that they have, their full potential was shown on Friday, right? Maybe not even because they had so many turnovers and mistakes, but I don't think that Quez Watkins style of number 3 receiver is what's going to put them over the top. They showed that they can be a historic offense with what they have, and that's without Dotson even getting going yet. He only practiced 5 times before this matchup with the Eagles. Get him a whole nother week. I think Dotson can be that player.
First out, shout out to Patrick and everybody else on YouTube. Although 69% of people who watch our videos aren't subscribed, so you better hit that subscribe button right now to join the pack. But
we're posting shorts too on the daily, a podcast every day. Hit subscribe.
More content than ever, and especially if Jahan Dotson gets going, man. That's
they have that guy, Gino, I think.
That's one player that we have still yet to be seen, because
I'm excited to see him Monday.
Didn't touch the ball at all. I mean, you saw ways that they were going to implement Britton Covey, even Johnny Wilson. You saw that they have roles for them. Covey's a more motion man,
and I think it was more of that
blocking
too, Gino, because Dotson wasn't probably fully ready to take on Moore.
No, they only acquired him a couple weeks ago.
Right.
They got him the last week of the preseason. This is also a position in this offense where a lot of it is timing based. A lot of it is choice based. If they're playing man, you run this route. If they're playing zone, you run this route. You have to be on the same page with these guys if you're running mesh. So there are little intricacies that Jahan Dotson should be able to bring into this offense that once he gets into the swing of things, I don't think we'll have concerns. But at the same time, Lou, I saw enough downfield ability out of the big 3.
I was going to say the deep threat part, they have multiple guys.
I mean, that wheel route to Saquon, that's a vertical shot. You're pushing him up the football field. You got multiple routes downfield. That one to A.J. Brown, the touchdown, putting him into space, taking those vertical shots. It's only a matter of time before Devontae gets involved. The seam areas are where Dallas Goedert really is a threat. I don't think you need that type of player, but they did bring in a long speed type of receiver to the practice squad today, former 3rd round pick in Eric Gray. So maybe that's Danny Gray. Eric Gray is actually a kid I know from high school. That's funny that I said that, but yeah, Danny Gray.
Shout out to Eric Gray.
Yeah, maybe that's one of those guys that, hey, we want a little bit more long speed on the back end of our room. Johnny Wilson doesn't present that. Britton Covey doesn't present that. Maybe Anaya Smith isn't ready in that regard yet. But at the same time, the guys up top, they distributed their top 3 touches in terms of target share to those big 3 as much as anybody when it comes to their respective big 3s did all week long. So they're going to push it through those guys more than anything.
Gino, I'm really excited to see Dotson on Monday. I think a whole nother week, he can be a player that
Atlanta's not as good as Green Bay either, folks.
No,
just say that.
And Pittsburgh, while they looked awful and only scored
they didn't score a touchdown.
6 field goals,
but 6 field goals.
I will say they did have success on Atlanta over the top. George Pickens had multiple deep shots, even on AJ Terrell, and I imagine he'll be guarding AJ Brown and Devontae Smith all game. So Dotson will have his opportunities Monday to bounce back for sure. Let's go to another question here from @King22Koopa. Are we concerned with the edge group and Jordan Davis specifically at all after that first game? We kind of talked about this yesterday. Again, the field was a problem. Josh Sweat, Bryce Huff, I saw them slip multiple times going back to the All-22. But yeah, I am a little bit concerned about the edge group. Jordan Davis, I'm not. I've kind of accepted who he is as a pass rusher, at least at this point in time. But, I thought he was actually very good against the run for the majority of that game. So I'm not concerned. I've kind of accepted what I'm going to get out of him, at least as of right now, until I see something dramatically change.
I think that probably was one of his better pass rushing games too.
Yeah, you were saying that yesterday. So
yeah, his pass rush get off, according to Next Gen Stats, is in the top.
So there we go.
15 of all defensive linemen in the league. So he does show that explosiveness still. I think Green Bay also did a really good job trying to take that away from Philadelphia. I mean, there weren't any super deep, long developing plays, and if they did
No.
a good job getting them in play action environments where they're able to get the quarterback off platform a little bit. The edge group, that's one where at the same time, they did a pretty good job fitting the run for the most part too. Like that's one thing that's never going to show up in the box score, obviously. Jordan Davis did a great job. Like that's the thing with Jordan Davis too, outside of the edge rushers. He does so much dirty work that Zach Bond doesn't have the game that he has without a guy like Jordan Davis taking up two gaps, allowing your linebackers to fill downhill. He looked good if you turn on the tape when it comes to a 0-1 tech, stand over the center, stand over the guard, take up room for your linebackers to make plays. That's kind of exactly what you want out of him. But the edge group, maybe that's still a question that we won't get figured out for the next couple weeks or so. Like, I don't think you're going to see outside of Josh Sweat because Nolan Smith, Brandon Graham, and Bryce Huff, they all took around the same amount of snaps. I think it was in 1 or 2 snaps of each other. Fangio's not going to boil that group down for another couple weeks or so. Like, he's going to at least give it a month and say, I need to find my guy. And once he does, I think it'll be pretty evident. But right now, who's that next guy up the edge, man? Like, they didn't get any pressure from that.
No.
We'll see if it was the field. It's going to be a different environment going against Atlanta, maybe an offensive line that you could take advantage of. One of the things that Atlanta, I think, presents a big opportunity if they don't fix it, they did not put Kirk Cousins in a play action situation in the entire game.
And he looked like someone that could not move after that Achilles tear. And he's 37 years old. Yeah. Like, yeah, Gino, if they don't hit home this Monday night, then absolutely I'm going to be concerned.
Ask questions. Yeah,
and I thought the offensive line of Atlanta did not look great. Pittsburgh kind of had their way with that front for a lot of that game.
Watt went wild. Yeah. Alex Highsmith was going wild. Cam Hayward was having a day.
So it's on my radar. It's on our radar. I wouldn't say we're concerned yet, but it's something we'll keep a close eye on. And because they have a favorable matchup on Monday, we'll dive into that matchup tomorrow. Our first look at Eagles-Falcons coming up. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Make sure, again, your second listen is the Locked On NFL podcast. 2 shows a day. Tyler Rowland, Tony Wiggins, they got you covered Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. Thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening. And let's go, Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.